where is the telecom industry and all of its offshoots leading us? The internet, computers, etc. Where is all of the magical agent as it grows and grows and grows and has unlimited capacity for further invention and tweaking the next big thing? And it's always there. It's always coming. Where does that lead us? Well, it leads us to moving further and further and further and further and further away from our origin. It leads us further away from our source, from that which we come from spirit. So spirit has been the source of our existence on earth. That's the spiritual point. The technological point is move further and further and further and further and further away from the origin. That's where it takes us. So the more the kids are playing these games, the more they're interested in the mechanical area of life, which is seen as the source of salvation. That becomes the object of worship. And we are born with an impulse to worship. Just as Freud pointed out that there is a sexual impulse that we're born with and an aggressive impulse, and Jung pointed out that we're born with a religious impulse, which we take further to say we're born with an impulse to worship. That can be exploited. And so the agents that run the world, the institutions that run the world, that operate according to the laws of the jungle, natural selection, survival of the fittest, and so on, they want to act through the power, the will to power, domination and subjugation, master slave. So they want people to come in servitude to them. And the way that you get hooked into that is the novelty created by the magic agent. So for kids, it's an incredible thing to turn on a set, talk to people all over the world, play these games that are hypnotizing because you're being hypnotized by the suggestion that this will lead you to where you're wanting to go to, which is peace, happiness, contentment, truth, love, which is really provided by the world of spirit, because the world of spirit and living the life of spirit is the most practical, realistic, prudent way of life. It's the way of life that provides the most realistic approach to our existence to give us all that we've been yearning for. But the kids are addicted because it's very easy to hypnotize. Once they're hypnotized by the movements. And it was interesting. Whatever anybody wants to say about this, of course. But my teacher of blessed memory said to me once, we talked about Sesame Street. She didn't like Sesame Street. Sesame Street has great following and great popularity. Why didn't you like Sesame Street? She said, because they show the animals moving. They show the numbers moving. And the moving hypnotizes you. Like dangling an object, a shiny object in front of people to hypnotize them. So that people are being put to sleep. They're walking around in a waking sleep, a walking sleep. So that when you're in a sleep-like state, you're open to suggestion. And so we're subject to suggestion 100% of the time. So we're not following our own initiative. We're following a post-hypnotic suggestion to do what we're told, with the promise that we will find our own happiness, retirement, fulfillment through that direction. So the kids are now becoming subject to the same thing. So we're being made into robots. 1984. We're being made into robots. And the more you become robotic, the more you're pulled away from your source, that you're no longer in that love relationship between yourself and the Creator. I think it's a very good question about what happens in the formative stages of life with regard to this technology that's inundating us and what becomes of the children. And I think two things take place, and they're connected. One is that they're catching on to the plethora of things that exist and the plethora of possibilities, the multiplicity, we call it. The multiplicity of life is so great now, more than we've ever known. It just magnifies itself, and it's escalating. The magnitude is enormous. So they're catching on to the general belief system the mass conscious belief system that's been perpetuated by the business institution in general, which says the greed factor, wanting more, better, and different. And they're catching on at an early age. Getting more, better, and different is your way through materialism to get to that salvific state that the serpent has promised. So you want to do all of that. Well, what's involved with that gives it its charge, because we're talking about, like electromagnetic charge. So we're talking about a charge, and that charge is called the 5 dark currents of will. The 5 dark currents of will support the laws of natural selection, survival of the fittest, laws of the jungle. The 5 dark currents of will: to take, keep, hold on to at the expense of others, advance at the expense of others, and the desire to be great, usurping the knowledge and power to become God, vanity. So they're taught early on through the miseducation of their of the environment around them, parents, sibs, family relatives, the schooling, which reinforces, it's one of the educational institution that reinforces it, the media that reinforces it, the next big thing having. And so they're taught and conditioned from a very early age that the thing that will guide them through life, that will give them what they need, is to operate through the 5 dark currents of will, to fulfill the greed factor, wanting more, better, and different. And this taking, keeping, holding on to at the expense of others, you see it in the world around us, what has eventuated from that. The wars, the mayhem, the disorganization of society. The most amazing thing is that we haven't perished, that the world hasn't perished. There is a goodness in the world. There is a truth function that's happening that keeps the world going. But what flies in our face in such a blatant way is this disorganization and mayhem based on the greed factor powered by the 5 dark currents of will. So if we want to create a collaborative world, teaching the children to in this way, to collaborate. As Isaiah said, the lion lies down with the lamb. We don't know war anymore. We turn our swords into plowshares. So we're developing a communal, cooperative way. So we change the 5 dark currents of will to the 5 light currents of will. That's what we begin to teach our children, and an educational system that can arise, that's an educational system alternate to the one that exists now, because it's unless they're willing to incorporate it into the school curriculum, to turn taking into giving, and keeping into sharing, and holding on to at the expense of others into renouncing, giving away, sacrificing, without a hidden agenda. It's not like I give charity because I get tax deducted. I give huge amounts, I get tax deducted. And the advancing at the expense of others is mentoring, teaching others, educating others how to become a collaborative and cooperative human being, to become really a human being. Some of the traits involved in that is making a contribution as you have, making a contribution, being harmless, and being considerate. And that is it necessitates shifting the dark currents of will to what I call the light currents of will. So the 5th dark current of will was the desire to be great, usurping the knowledge and power, the fundamental error. So what we're doing is we're shifting that to being humble, to becoming a servant for the divine. And so we are at the service of something that's greater than us. At first, something that's greater than us, that gave us the gift of being in life here, to which we're eternally grateful and have gratitude and thanks. The question is, what can be done about these addictions and compulsions, and how can we maybe reverse them? Are there ways and tools that are available to us for ourselves that we can bring to ourselves to bear to make changes? So not necessarily having to depend necessarily on the outside, where there may be beneficial tools available to do this. Can you call on yourself? Well, we're told already in the wisdom literature that we're made in the image and likeness of the source, of the creator. So we're born with all the knowledge. We're born with the capacities to emulate that. So my focus is on the use of our will and the use of this capacity of mental imagery. The mind focusing on those inner symbols, those symbols meaning images that are full of knowledge that give us an understanding about how to direct our lives. So the image is a belief given form. We mentioned that before. That's the seed in the womb of consciousness held there perceptually as an image. Conception, seed, womb, image. So we can take any particular situation that we might look at, like an addiction and so on, or compulsion of any sort, and we can ask ourselves, what does it look like? What does it look like? Can you tell me what it looks like? So the person may say, I see myself grabbed by a mechanical hand on the keyboard, and I can't move it. Okay, because you can't talk to me about anything without knowing its image. Because what I'm talking to you out here in is this exoteric discursive language, words, but there's an inner, natural, inner, true language called image. There are two forms of language, an outer language and an esoteric inner language. So you can't say something without knowing the image that accompanies it. So if I say to you, calm, well, most everybody I've ever talked to has said a clear lake. And I've said to people, peacefulness. And they say, leaves blowing in a gentle breeze on a tree. Anger, I see flames in front of me. It's all there. So you see so what does the addiction look like? Here, I see them, I'm giving an example. I see the mechanical hand holding my fingers to the keyboard. So I say to you, there are two things that are going to happen now, very quickly, and this is my new work that I've developed, which finds that healing can take place very quickly, whatever the situation is, that we can make a shift and turn it around. So I say to you, reverse it. What do you mean reverse it? Well, you can't, we have the capacity, the inner capacity, to change our beliefs at any moment. So if I tell you to change it, that means two things. I change my belief, and by changing the belief, I change the image. So my belief is, I can be free of this hand. So tell me what the image is to become free of this hand. All right. So then, as this is imagination and it's interplay, bring anything you need with you. Anything can happen. There are no rules of logic that control it. It's limitless. Anything you need. So I take my other hand and I have a blowtorch in it, and I apply the blowtorch to the mechanical hand and I sever it. And it falls off, and I can move my hand. So the image and the belief, the seed and the image have now changed. And I say to the person, just to reinforce it, that you have going to your mind gym or your mental gym, go and reinforce it by creating mental abs or mental pecs or mental lats. You go into the gym, going to the mental gym and working out. So do this exercise every morning when you wake up to start your day in a new way. And at night before you go to bed, do it before you go to bed so you go to sleep with a new attitude. So you have a regenerative, refreshing sleep. 21 days. Why? Because it's been found by researchers it takes 21 days or so to change a habit. That the reps in the mental gym change the abs and the pecs and the lats, just like going to the physical gym. Now, you can't tell me that you are trapped in this addiction, that you're trapped, unless you understood its opposite. First, we reversed it, but you can't talk to me in the language unless you understand its opposite. What do you mean? Well, you can't say to me it's daytime out unless you understood night. You can't say that person is tall unless you understood short. You can't say heavy unless you understood unless you understood thin. You can't do that. Language is created this way. It's the structure of language that exists in the dual world in these oppositions. So what's the opposite of trapped for you? There's no right way. What is it for you? I think for a moment. Free. Okay. What's the image of free? So I see myself. Running freely through a field of wheat without any impediments. That's my image of free. Anytime during the day that you experience the trappedness, which is the addiction, anytime it comes to your awareness or your attention that it's happening, that you become sensitized to it, use that as the teacher, the reminder, the educator in your own system to have you do the opposite. So every time you sense the addiction coming or that it's here, see yourself running through the field of wheat, free. What's the feeling? Relief. What's the sensation? Lightness. So I tell the person, say it, free, see it, feel it, get that feeling, and sense it. And do it at every time it takes place. Well, oh gee, I forgot it happened. So now that you remember, do it. That you remember you forgot. In the exercise of the acetylene torch, when the hand is relieved, you say to yourself, you see it, so you see yourself freed of that. So you say to yourself, what is it that you're experiencing now that it's severed? I sense a openness to my existence. I sense an openness. What's the feeling? Peaceful, quiet. So you see it, you feel it, you sense it, and you say to yourself, what? Released. Now we do it in a regular way for 21 days because we know it takes 21 days, and it may happen before, to change a habit. It's been shown. So the question is, what's the relationship of online time to depression and the relationship of human interaction, personal interaction, and feeling good with that, as opposed to maybe other kinds of interaction that you might get with your communications on the computer. So the answer to the first for me is that the online time, draws your life energy. It just draws the light, it siphons the life force out of you. It depletes you of energy. The kind of depression that's existing with relation to that online time is a physiological depression of a loss of energy. Your system is depressed. It's reflected in the mood state. The mood states and the physiological states are reflected to each other. In my system, my healthcare system, my model of healthcare, the physical, the emotional, the mental, the social, and the moral are all interrelated. They're all simultaneously acting with each other. So what happens in the physiological state is reflected in the social state, in the mental state, the mood state, the emotional state, and so on. So you get drained by all the time that you're talking to something that's not responding immediately to you, or there's no interaction. And it applies to the second question is, well, how come you feel good when there's interpersonal stuff? Because when you are interpersonally related to somebody, you're in life. You're in life. We're going through near-life experiences, interacting with each other. When you're in the communication swamp of online communication impersonally, it's an impersonal communication, and that's a communication that has two factors to it. One is it's closer to when there's no feedback, there's a lull, and there's an emptiness and a void, and there's a sense of death in there that creeps in. So you're feeling that you're getting pulled into a vacuum. And so this is really a critical issue about the depression that appears also, because depression means I'm losing my connection to my interpersonal relationships. So the lack of interpersonal contact creates this vacuum, which is really close to that, as I mentioned before, I set before you at every moment life and death choose. And it's a death-choosing direction that's taking place. And we're feeling wasted, worn out from all of that. It came to my awareness that in Cedars-Sinai Hospital out in L.A., they have, in the units, in the obstetrical units, they have the women in one room and the babies in the other room, and they're connected by iPads, by some sort of electrical connection and devices, so that they could bond. That's akin to a death experience or a near-death experience. Are they the same? Spiritually speaking, of course not. They're not the same at all. There are there may be some points of similarity, which of course exist all over the place. Many things have similarities connected, but there are significant points of dissimilarity. To bond with somebody on a human interactive merging level, and when the child is being hugged and held and so on, is a much different bonding than to consider an impulse passing from one room to another and to call that bonding. We could, in analogy to the death and near-death experience, call it a near-bonding experience. It's not a bonding. As you see, it's a glib use of language to make one thing seem to be the same as the other, and that's constantly used all the time in language to deceive people, to give them an impression that there's something significant of truth being said here. It's not. It's not a life experience about mother and child being connected. It's a near-life experience. It's not the same. So we want to consider that can't substitute for the bonding that's necessary. Well, if the mother and the child can't bond, for some reason, you have somebody else come in and bond with the child, hug, pet, stroke, and so on, etc. It's hard to imagine a situation in which the mother can't, in some manner, shape, or form, have some sort of interaction with that child, in some manner, shape, or form. Even to bring the child in, and if the mother is immobile, to bring the child in and have them stare into each other's eyes, that's bonding. Now we're talking about something that's called something, which isn't something. Emperor's New Clothes syndrome.